Good morning. It's Tuesday, April 4th, day 30 of Lent. We're continuing our Romans study. Father Patrick from St. Paul's Episcopal Church here. Good to be with you. Today we're jumping into chapter 13. There's only 16 chapters left in Romans, so we're almost there, if the fact that it's the 30th day of a 40-day season didn't let you know that as well. Paul is in this section of Romans 12 through 15 where he's trying to give some exhortations and advice about how to live as a Christian in the world. Yesterday, speaking specifically about how to love and how to care for those who care for you and also those who persecute you as well. And so today he's going to jump into our relationship with or the Romans' relationship anyway, with an institution that often was a persecuting force in the lives of the Jews and the Christians, and that is the state. So today's section is Romans 13, 1 through 7, and it is called in my Bible, Being Subject to Authorities. So this is the beginning of chapter 13, 1 through 7. Let every person be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those authorities that exist have been instituted by God. Therefore, whoever resists authority resists what God has appointed, and those who resist will incur judgment. For rulers are not a terror to good conduct, but to bad. Do you wish to have no fear of the authority? Then do what is good, and you will receive its approval, for it is God's servant for your good. But if you were to do what is wrong, you should be afraid, for the authority does not bear the sword in vain. It is the servant of God to execute wrath on the wrongdoer. Therefore one must be subject, not only because of wrath, but also because of conscience. For the same reason you also pay taxes, for the authorities are God's servants, busy with this very thing. Pay to all what is due them, taxes to whom taxes are due, revenue to whom revenue is due, respect to whom respect is due, and honor to whom honor is due. So 7 verses about our relationship to authorities in general, but specifically he's speaking here about the Roman state. And this is a really interesting section for those of us who know the larger arc of of both the Bible and of early Christian history, in that the Roman Empire at this time is definitely not friendly to Christians, and so it's and the Bible and other places in Acts, especially, shows the apostles advocating for a kind of resistance to the authorities. So it's interesting to have this kind of counter that. When I was doing some research about this, I read about a couple scholars who suggest that the key to understanding this section, in light of a Christian message that is generally counter the power of the authorities, is to look and see, and it's possible that the tax language here in verses 5, 6, and 7 is possibly code language. Right around this time, Christians and Gentiles in general are generally upset or annoyed by Jews who are able to circumvent some of the state taxes by paying a temple tax. And so it feels like a little bit of tax evasion to those who are in the Gentile ranks. And animosity toward the Jews was increasing. And obviously for Paul, that's a major problem. And so these scholars would suggest that what Paul is trying to do here is to protect those who were already under persecution, that is the Jews, Christians not being completely persecuted at this point in their history. So Paul is saying, listen, behave yourselves and pay your taxes, and don't complain about other people paying their taxes, because that could end up being bad for them. Another way that we understand this, or we see this, is that Paul isn't He doesn't use language which allows us to see the state as an agent of God that is always for good. We see this especially, here's the Greek word of the day too, in verse 3. He says, for rulers are not a terror to good conduct, but to bad. Do you wish to have no fear in the authority? He uses the words terror and fear here very directly. He could have said something like, "For rulers care for those who follow the rules," but he doesn't. He says they are a terror. So the Greek word here it should be a familiar one, phobos. Terror is phobos, and then to fear is phobeomai. Obviously, these both have the root word of phobos, which is where we get it just means fear or terror, which is where we get like, arachnophobia or agoraphobia or claustrophobia. The fears of specific things come from this Greek word. So Paul is wanting to show us. So he's externally in joining the Christians of Rome to follow the leaders, to follow the authorities. But he's really saying this. It's possible that he's really saying this because he wants them to understand that the authorities do indeed have power over their life and death, which we know as Christians isn't ultimately a problem for us because of the resurrection. But it is a problem for the Jews if Christians continue to join the rest of the Roman Empire in being annoyed by their ability to evade taxes. So just an interesting little way to read this. You can also read it as a way to say that we should follow the authorities, and that's a perfectly fine way to read. So what's the thought for the day? Just going along with this, what is your relationship to the state? How do you think that you as a Christian are called to be in interaction with our government and the powers of this world? There certainly are witnesses on both sides of the question about how much authority we ascribe to the state and how much authority we try to ascribe to God. I don't think there's an answer here. I just think it's a good thing to think about and to be intentional about. Don't just go along with your life without considering these things. So have a happy and a holy Lent, and we'll see you again tomorrow.